Hello and welcome to the Heads and Volleys podcast with me, Lee Dunn.
Thanks for joining us today for episode number 2, titled The Game, starting with your preparation, leading into your warm-up for the game, then kick-off and the chaos that ensues, followed by halftime, into the second half, and then the full time and beyond. Huge thank you to Tactical Pad for sponsoring this episode of Heads and Volleys. I use their software to show my players formations and then movement within that formation, and you can do the same too. Create simple little GIFs that you can show to your players and encourage them to learn the movements of the players on the screen. They can replicate that for themselves, but it also just gives them that visual advantage. Use the same in your practice plans to show the players what the game looks like and what you're expecting to see. And then if you actually visit my YouTube channel, Lee Dunn Soccer, you'll see some moments in there of combining the tactical pad demonstrations with my own practices. So you'll see how it looks on the GIF and then how it actually looks in practice. It's a fantastic tool to show to your players. Really encourage you just to take a moment to think about the last time you were coaching a game, or maybe you're a parent and you were watching or just observing a youth soccer game and everything that goes on around it. The chaos, the craziness, the cheering, the yelling, the shouting, the amount of players that may or may not know exactly what they're doing or what's expected of them. And then think about the coach. If you've ever watched a youth soccer coach, what they go through. They're dealing with players and their personalities. They're dealing with parents. They're dealing with making sure they've got all the players written down on the player cards or the game cards. They are also considering tying shoelaces or making sure the match ball has enough air in it, or the substitutes have pennies on and the goalkeeper has their gloves on. And their players know what a number 3 and a number 2 are, or if it's left back or right back, or the kids that's showing up 5 minutes late or 2 minutes late or just before kickoff, or maybe there's not enough players, or maybe they have too many players. There's so much that goes on during the game. So just take a moment to consider what that experience looks like for you. And I think that will help you really kind of shape your mind for what you can get out of today's podcast in terms of what is the game. So I want to start with preparation. Beginning to prepare for your game. If you remember from the Setting Up for Success podcast, where we look at actually having an element of a season plan or a monthly plan or even a weekly plan, and then planning towards that event. So if you take a regular season, you may play on a Saturday or a Sunday. So a realistic starting point would be your first practice in the week. Maybe you practice once, twice, 3 times. So you practice on a Monday, you're really beginning to prepare in that microcycle for the game on the coming weekend. So really understand who your team is. What is your level of play? Of course, if you're at the professional level, that microcycle may also include a midweek game. It may also include some element of rehabilitation or recovery or travel for your team, depending on where you're traveling to. However, you may find that in the simple small town soccer that you are training twice a week and you're playing on the weekends. So understanding what that may look like for your team. Do you know who your opponent is? Do you scout your opponent? Are you able to understand who they are and the way they play? Maybe you've seen them in another game, but chances are that scouting them in the true term of scouting is completely unrealistic. So as a coach, I really encourage you to focus on the controllables. It's your practice theme. It's working within the big macro theme of the season or of the week or of the month. So you know exactly what you're trying to achieve with your players. Again, they will help keep you accountable if they know what's going on. So I would spend all of my practices, or in the build-up to my practices with my team, talking about the coming game. This is why we may do this ready for the game. We may be working on short passes to set the ball up for a long pass, because in our last game, we had this issue. Relating these problems or these issues to the game for the players will help them make sense. It will help them understand why they may be doing things. And sometimes with our youth players, we encourage not to be so reactionary. So if you're working with older players, it can be totally okay to then say to the players, in our game last weekend, we struggled with playing out of the back, for example. So then we can train this week and we can work on our focus of playing out of the back or of maintaining possession in such a way that we can continue to relate to it from our previous performance as well as the upcoming performance. For example, last weekend we struggled in this moment and gave away the ball several times. It wasn't just a one-off, it was a trend. So therefore we're working on it now so that for the coming weekend, that's not a repeated issue. Then you may also consider for those players and for those younger players where we have an overall plan and we don't want to be so reactionary, we can constantly reference for the coming game, hey, remember our goal for this week or for this month is to improve the way we receive the ball on our back foot, for example. So then when we get to the game, we should be able to receive the ball under pressure on that back foot and be able to turn or to connect with another player or however you really want to use that skill within your team. So it's really important that you understand, again, in the big picture of the season or of the cycle, where this game and where these practices fall in for your players and for you. So it's game day. Depending on the age of players, I like to go for about 30 to 45 minutes. Doesn't mean I'm warming up for the entire time, and actually I use a lot of that time to just to get to know my players. You know, how are you doing? Did you eat this morning? Did you sleep? You still look sleepy, especially if you get a 9 a.m. game. Players don't want to get up early, especially as they get a little older. So I really use that time just to connect with my players and not immediately focus on the task ahead of playing the game, but actually just be cool with them, if you like. Sometimes, especially being over here on the West Coast, there's soccer on TV still. So I'll pull up the game on my phone and I'll try and watch it with the players, or I'll talk to them about it. And granted, some of them may not know exactly what's going on, but they're soon going to learn as I watch and as I share with them what's going on. And then, of course, it's always relatable too. Wow, did you see that goal? Did you see where it came from? Did you see that? And there's nothing better than seeing it in such real time. The players are able to see exactly what's going on. So I also use that time to set some targets. Targets for the game, targets for my team. And these aren't necessarily targets that I'm just going to think of out of the blue, and they should definitely not be a surprise to my players. If we've spent the week maintaining possession and creating 2v1s, for example, then one of those targets that I'll identify for my team is to create and be successful in as many 2v1s as possible. Now, within those targets, I'm going to have measurables. So my first target, again, maybe to create 2v1s. How do we know we're being successful? Well, every time there's a 2v1, I make a note. Were we successful? Yes or no? My second target is going to be something also relative to practice or also relative to the coming game. Is it a chance for us to work on and show our 1v1 defending? So every time the opponent has the ball and we are faced with a 1v1, again, I make a note. How does my player deal with that? Are we successful or are we not successful? And I actually like to go a little deeper in that and identify which players are being successful and which are not being successful in the 1v1s. With the targets, you'll see a trend there. I try to go with an attacking and then also with a defending target. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and this is where I really have a lot of fun with setting targets. And this is let the players create the third target. And I really, really enjoy that because now they have a buy-in. Typically, you say to a player, give us a third target. What do you think collectively as a group? Generally, you'll get, we want to win. We want to score goals. Now, back to being measurable and back to, again, setting up for success with looking at what can we control. Winning the game is not necessarily controllable. So our third target is going to be a goal, and I'm going to steer them to the build-up to the goal. Will it be tied with the 2v1s? Will it be tied with 1v1 defending? So we want to score a goal after we've been successful in a 2v1 or after we have won a 1v1 defensive battle? Or is it something completely unrelated in that we want to score a goal from a corner kick because we like corner kicks and we seem to get a lot of them? Or is it we just want to score a goal in this half because we didn't score a goal in the last game? And then I can constantly relate to that target that the players gave me. Hey, you said you were going to score a goal. How are we going to do that? What is your process? What is your involvement in the team scoring a goal? So that brings me to my final point in terms of setting targets. And the reason I like setting 3 targets is that it helps to control the information overload. I see so many coaches, and I've been guilty of it myself, where I sit there and I say, and another thing. Oh, and when you get the ball, do this. Oh, and don't forget to do this. Oh, and we also need to do this. And last game we didn't do this. And blah, 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 blah. And the information just goes over and over and over and over and over. 3 targets help me stay concise, help give the players the buy-in, and should help us set up for the game. You may find yourself at a complex or at a field where there's already a game going on beforehand, and it's really difficult to get onto the field until that game's finished, which probably gives you about a 10 or a 15-minute warm-up, if that. So then, what does your warm-up look like? What are you asking your players to do? Is it relative to the game? Now, if you think about what a warm-up really is, it's compete and perform in multiple ways. It's physically, we get the blood pumping, we lengthen the muscles, we're more pliable, we're able to move, we're able to react, we're able to move quicker, change directions, strike the ball effectively. All of these physical components to a warm-up. But then there's also the psychological. It's players becoming engaged. They're focusing on the game. They're focusing on the task ahead. And one of the things I like to ask my players to do is psychologically think about the first time they received the soccer ball. The first time they received the ball in the game. What are they doing with it? How good is that first touch? They're taking a touch to the side and they're moving the ball on to their teammate. Then the second phase of that is, regardless of what happens in the first 5 minutes or first 10 minutes, everything is positive. You make a mistake, it's positive. The positive is that you've made that mistake and you can learn from that mistake. So it's just a real quick intro, your first touch, and then 5 or 10 minutes of positivity. And I say that because typically 5 to 10 minutes with older players, it's a little bit longer of a half, so 10 minutes is a real good window. With younger players, it could be as low as 2 or 3 minutes. Just set that mindset. Everything is positive. We take a good first touch and then everything is positive. And even if the first touch is bad, there's still a positive mindset. And that comes from me as the coach. I am positive. We are positive. We're having a good time. So then the actual physical component of the warm-up. And there are things like the 11 plus, and I'll add that in the show notes for you. That's from FIFA, where the players are in a little line and they jog forward and then spin out and go back to the start. And then there's all sorts of dynamic stretches throughout that. And I think that's really relative to players that are 12, 13, 14 and older. They really need that strict physical warm-up. But with the younger players, I really like to use a little bit of space and put high pressure on them. And high pressure in terms of rondos, 4v1s, 4v2s, 5v2s, 5v1 if necessary. These are fun little games that are activating the players. Psychologically, they're focusing on everything that's in the game, in the rondo. Thanks to Johan Cruyff for that comment. But everything in there, they're under pressure. There's a defender, there's the first touch element, there's the pass, there's the communication, there's opening up, there's checking away and in, and being there for your teammates. And the thing I like about having 2 defenders in the middle is that if one player gives the ball away, then the person to their left or the person to their right is the player that then goes into the middle with them to replace the 2 in there. And that is to encourage them to support the player on the ball. Because I don't want to be in the middle of a rondo anyway, let alone going into the middle because my teammate gave the ball away. But if you think about how relative that is to a game, you give the ball away in a game, you could give away a goal. That's affecting everybody. Or now suddenly we're defending deep as opposed to being able to play forwards. So really encouraging all of the elements of the game into my warm-up as quickly as possible. Now, what you will see, and this is a fan favorite, is the line of players probably at about halfway with the goalkeeper in goal and the coach standing right about the edge of the box. And the kid dribbles, a couple touches, plays the ball to the coach. Coach lays it off, kid takes a shot. Next player goes, dribbles in. you think about getting your players ready to play. If they're standing in a line with the ball at their feet, waiting for their turn, how real is that? How realistic is it for a player to have a free dribble and a free layoff and a free shot? And what's worse is often when they miss, because that typically happens, a coach or a parent on the sideline will just say, "Oh, unlucky. Go and get the ball and have another go." But that's not how it happens in the game. You have to win the ball. You have to maintain possession. So I try and build that in with simple little rondos. And again, the simpler the rondo, the easier it is for the players to be focused on the game. I'm not giving them an information overload. I'm not introducing some new complex passing pattern where now suddenly they're having to think a little bit more about something that may not be relevant to the game. Everything I do in a warm-up is typically the same every week, and I will have run through it in practice. We'll have the same structure every single time, simply because I don't need to confuse the players. I don't need to make them think any differently other than what they're doing in the game. Within the preparation and the warm-up phase, consider your starting team, your starting lineup, your starters. It's a big deal for a lot of parents if their kid gets to start, when realistically, probably in youth soccer, there are some coaches that will use tactics where they will not start their strongest players and then kind of surprise the opponents by loading in their best players after 5 or 10 minutes. Now, you're the coach, you do whatever you like. However, you still have to identify your starting lineup. What does that starting lineup look like? What is your formation? Hopefully your players are familiar with what that formation is and also what the roles within that formation are for them based on practice and based on previous discussions. But you still have to communicate what that lineup looks like. I like to do it within my initial preparation chat, and that's because then it helps players be prepared. And the players that are substitutes, I tend to tell them that they are using the warm-up as a chance to still remain engaged and still remain a part of the team because they could be called on at any second. Youth soccer here in the US, it's substitutions on the fly, so you can sub almost any time during the game and sub as much as you like. And it's really important that these players understand that a starting position, mostly in youth and recreational soccer, is not necessarily the be-all and end-all of the game. And it's not like the Premier League where if you're on the bench, there's a chance that you may not play, or if you play, it's only for 5 minutes. That's just not the case here. So it's really important to set that standard with your players. Unless, of course, you do believe that a player has missed practice all week and they should be on the bench for most of the game or for the first half or whatever. But again, that's something that you would need to communicate with that player and with that family. It should never definitely be a surprise to those players. So my lineup, I like to set out cones in our little formation. And is the other coach watching this? Is the other coach learning something about my team? Is he stealing some of my tactics? I mean, maybe, maybe not, but I'm doing this for the benefit of my players and not to out-coach the opponent. Not yet, anyway. So I set my cones out, and I use the mini cones, the mini quick goal cones, and I set them out and I say, okay, here is our formation. You guys know this. It's a 1-2-3-1 for my 7v7, or it's a 1-3-2-3, or a 1-4-4-2, or 4-3-3, whatever it looks like. The cones are out just merely as placeholders for my players. Then I'll identify the team and then build the team around her. So now she can see the players that are around her. She can also see what's expected of those players because I'll use examples. The ball is here right now. Where are we going to move to? The goalkeeper has the ball. You guys are going to move off your cones and show me what your positions are going to be like. So these are all things that I've covered and are just reminders. Then I'll introduce substitutions or common substitutions. Hey, Susie, you're going to switch with Jenny. She's coming in. Show me what that looks like now. So they'll quickly do a little high five and they'll change positions. Back now, Jenny is inside and she's on the field. She looks around. The players see her. This is all stuff that I do in that little moment of preparation so they begin to see the players around them. Hopefully, the players that are identified as the starting players are now positioned in a way that they are familiar with each other. Then I relate the warm-ups to them working together. If we're working on 4v1 rondos, I'll tend to put defensive players together with one in the middle and attacking players because they're going to be working together in the field. So why would I not just give them that little encouragement to talk to each other more during that warm-up? You can do a lot of the work during the week so that when it comes to the game, everything goes without saying and the players understand their warm-up and they get their shape around the cones real quickly and they're in position. They understand that there's 3 targets and that the third target is theirs to create, so they will know exactly what's going on in every minute in the build-up to the game, so nothing's a surprise. So definitely take some time to consider what your pre-game ritual looks like. So then it's kick-off. Game kicks off. What are you looking for? What on earth is going on? Everything we had said, all of that pretty pattern play that we had done at practice, or all of that identifying positions, and some coaches all like to go as far as positional rotation and all sorts of things that we like to think that the players understand, and then the game kicks off and it all goes out the window. Players are running all over the place and no one really knows what's going on. So what are you watching? What are you observing during the game? Do you find yourself with your eyes on the ball the entire time? And then in that situation, do you then find yourself telling your players what to do every time they get the ball? Look inside, pass, kick it, find Susie, she's open, can you cross it, beat her? Whatever these simple commands are, they come, and I've found from experience, they come a lot of the time from watching the ball. You see some of the best coaches in the world, and when you watch those coaches, they look away from the ball. They will be watching the players off of the ball, how they are either supporting or providing cover in defense. So you're watching your team. You're watching the ball. Are you watching the opponent? Every time the opponent gets the ball, what do they do with it? And we're looking for trends. Are they constantly playing the ball to the same central midfielder? Do they constantly just kick the ball down the field? Because that's a trend, and it's not a very nice trend by modern soccer terms, but it's certainly a trend that you can behave and react to with your team. So teams kicking it long, you may have your goalkeeper push up higher to retrieve that ball, or you may have a defender anticipate that and begin to drop back. But it's all about behavior off of the ball. The ball goes to that player that's going to kick it. How is your team reacting to it? Or are they proactively moving into positions that you've been able to identify for them? So just consider looking away from the ball a little bit. See the shape of the other team. See, are they overloading you? Are they underloading you? Do they have 3 defenders that stand on the edge of the 18-yard box waiting for the ball to come towards them? Or are they actually involved in the game? The next thing you may be concerned about are substitutions. A lot of coaches are under pressure with substitutions. You know, playing time, equal playing time. We need to make sure that everybody's able to get all of this playing time in, and this may be something that you need to be concerned about. Do you have a assistant coach? Is your assistant coach able to help you manage timings of substitutions? If it's really strict on 50% playing time, maybe you decide that they play half each. These are all sorts of things that you need to identify before the game, so you know what your plan is beforehand. Do you write anything down? Writing is one of my favorite things to do because it prevents me from shouting. Of course, I'm passionate about the game and I want to win and I want to control the game as much as possible, but I realize that I can control the game during the week, and at the weekend it's about the player's performance. So I write a lot of things down, and I write what I would call trends. So every time I see, for example, the opposition centre-back play to their number 3, their left defender, that is what I would call the trend. So every time that happens, I make a note and then begin to identify how my team can prevent that, or how my team can even allow it, and then proactively set up so that we can stop the next ball that comes from that left back, because maybe the ball goes to that left back and that left back keeps playing the ball 20 yards down the line and it keeps going in behind us. So we can let the ball go to the left back, but now we need to react to stop the ball going on from the left back. Or maybe you want to stop the ball going to the left back straight away, but understand that that ball will start going somewhere else. So writing things down really helps you process what it is that's going on the field. And then I also write a lot of things down about my own team too. Jimmy keeps playing forwards. That's great. I really like that, because then when I see Jimmy at halftime, I can say, Jimmy, that's brilliant. I really appreciate what you're doing there. I think you've done a great job. Or if it's another player that continues to play the ball inside, but really we want the ball to go outside, those are moments that I'm writing down so I can address them, not only at halftime or not only if I substitute that player off, but also for future practices. And I can identify with that player, you keep playing the ball inside, and I want to understand why, and why I don't want you to play that ball inside, or why it may not be appropriate at the times that you're doing it, and then how to adjust from there. So the chaos is going on. Write things down. Take a moment to think about what you would shout, and then write it down. Work with the players on the sideline. A lot of the time, you, as a youth soccer coach, may identify a problem that's going on, a common trend of an issue, and we tend to believe that we can fix that problem by substituting on another player. However, if you ever turn around and look at the bench whilst the game is going on, are those players truly paying attention? Are they 100% engaged? Or are they flipping bottles? Or if you're on turf, the rubber crumb, maybe in nice little mounds in front of the bench. This is stuff that is realistic. This is going on behind your back or even in front of your face. And these are kids. These are what kids are going to do. So I will say, hey, you are about to go into number 11. You're going to go and play on the left wing. I want you to watch Jenny, who's playing on the left wing right now, and I want you to tell me what you could do differently or what she's doing really well. And I pass that task on to every single player on the bench, because if they want to play, and chances are they do, because they probably said, Coach, can I go in yet? Coach, can I go in yet? Well, here is your chance to prove that you can go and play. I mean, I'm going to play you anyway, of course, but I want you to be engaged when you go on so you understand what's being asked of you. How many of you as a coach, and this is something that is really difficult for a lot of coaches, of sitting down, actually sitting down and watching. And you may remember from the Setting Up for Success podcast where Joey mentioned a coach will be fighting and fighting and fighting, and then with the last 5 minutes just give up and sit down. And I'm not talking about sitting down and giving up, but merely sitting down and observing and not barking orders or giving commands or telling players what they should and should not be doing, but merely sitting down and watching what's going on. Every time we get the ball and one of our targets was 2v1, how many times are we creating a 2v1, or how many times are we maximizing the 2v1? In what areas of the field? These are wonderful observations that you can really help to encourage your players through a little team talk. So it's halftime. As soon as that whistle goes, I walk onto the field and I high-five every single player that's coming off. I'll walk into the middle of the field. I'll go and greet the goalkeeper and walk off with the goalkeeper, who is typically the last one off because they're the furthest away. But I make sure every player is high-fived and every player comes off and high-fives all of the substitutes too. We're a team. We're still playing. We're enjoying ourselves. And it can't be told that we could be 5-0 down. We could be 10-0 up. We're still playing the game, and we're still playing with ourselves in such a way that a high five means so much, good or bad. It's still a great level of support from all of us involved. High fives mean so much. And the amount of coaches that sit down and say, come on in, well, go and get your players, go and see them. Halftime, team talks. We have a lot of information out there. Again, you could Google soccer halftime team talk and you can find videos of horror team talks. You may have seen some TV shows or some movies where you hear these crazy talks of people swearing and shouting and blaming players, or you may hear them not say anything and leave it up to the players to decipher what the problem is. But I like to visit those 3 targets again. Number 1, 2v1s. I have written down multiple times, or I've made a note of several times where a 2v1's happened. Players, what do you think we are doing well in 2v1s? What could we do better? And then we talk about it for a minute or so. Try and get some opinion from the players who I have identified as being key in those 2v1s. Then visit the 1v1s and the same. Reflect on the players. Reflect on the positions on the field where it's being key for us to have success or not having success. And then the third one, as a group, you said we are going to probably score goals. How are we doing? How could we score more goals? And generally, again, it ties into the first and the second target. That's all my team talk is. Is everybody okay? You're all having fun? You had some water? Chances are they may complain about the referee, or they may say something about the parents on the sideline yelling every time they get the ball. But that's away from me giving information, and that's a conversation I'm more than happy to have with the players. And if I need to run over and talk to the parents really quickly, I will happily do that. But halftime is also a time to rest and to take water on and prepare for the second half. So I'm not changing anything dramatically and saying, oh, and another thing, and don't forget when you do this, oh, and when you do this, don't forget to do this. I identify the starting lineup, and away we go. We're ready to play. We've covered our 3 targets, and that's all I'm asking of my players. I'm not trying to overload them too much. Now, you may want to adding something different, or you may have a general concern if, for example, the same player keeps getting the ball and keeps causing problems for you. But there's a very good chance that you can address that with your 1v1 defending, because you can identify every time their number 10 gets the ball, how do we deal with that? 1v1s, perfect. Do you get tight? Do you get close? Whatever, however you identify the 1v1, that's how you work with your players within the targets, but specifically to the game. So the second half kicks off, and I love to sit down and watch again. I observe. I have my notebook, and I will scribble notes. What's going on? What's changed? That first 5 minutes, watching. Have they changed anything? Does it matter if they've changed anything? How are my players doing from the start? And the reason I like to go back on with the team that came off is because they're already familiar with playing with each other, and they're already familiar with having been on the field, that it's a momentary break in the game and they're right back to it. If I start making dramatic changes, who knows what's going on, or players coming on may not have been paying attention during halftime, or all sorts of things could happen. So I really try and keep the same players on the field as much as possible. And then I follow the same trend for the second half as I do in the first. Identify players that the substitutes should be watching, because they're going to be the likely substitution. Then I'll also challenge my players that are on the sideline to help me make a difference. How do we change this game if we need to make a change? How do we help ourselves in 2v1 so that when those players enter the field, they have an idea and they can begin to, hopefully, communicate with their players in supporting 2v1s or in successfully defending in 1v1s. And hopefully that third one pushes us to, if the team target was a goal, then that's what we're looking for. So it's full time whistle goes. Again, I'm on the field, regardless of the result. High fives with everybody. High five the opponents coming off the field too. Great game, well played. And I encourage my players all the time, win or loss. Good job. Come on, off the field, here we go. Get a quick drink. And then, as is tradition here in the US, we like to do a hands in the middle and a big cheer, 1, 2, 3, good game, Cougars, for example. So just like pros, I have all my players line up and jog across the fields with applause above their heads to their parents and to what we would call the fans, just like you see the pros do when they walk around the field applauding their fans. We do the same thing. We're very thankful for these players being able to be on the field, and a large part is because of the fans that are on the side of the field, the parents, the guardians, the aunties and uncles that bring the players along to the games. And then we'll have a quick debrief. Regardless of the result, did you have fun playing the game? You cannot control the results, but you can absolutely control your involvement in the game and how much fun you're having by committing or by not committing. Because if you say you didn't have fun, then that's something that I'm going to make a note of and just keep an eye on you. And it may be external factors. Maybe your dad was shouting or your mum was yelling, or maybe you didn't play all that much. And that's something that I'm aware of as a coach, but I genuinely care that you had a good time. Then I talk about expectations for the coming week. We have a game, we have practice, I'll see you the same time at this field, whatever the situation is, and that's it. So then I dismiss my players, and I'll just take a moment with my notebook just to add any additional thoughts. If your parents want to talk to me, they're welcome to, but I would appreciate them giving me a heads up first so they don't come and yell at me. I've worked within clubs and within organizations where there's been an expectation that parents cannot talk to the coach for 48 hours after the game. And the idea behind that is that it prevents angry parents questioning game time or choosing to give their opinion, free information from parents that genuinely care. And that's something that you have to be considerate of. So when considering a rule like a 48-hour rule, I only like to consider that if you're really angry and you really want to shout at me. Because I don't want you to shout at me on the sideline. I'm giving my best for your player and for the team. So I'd appreciate understanding what your concern is, and then I will make a plan to talk with you the day after, and such and such. And a lot of the issues are going to be playing time. I'm really annoyed that my kid isn't playing. Why is she not playing? Why does he only ever get 5 minutes a half? Let's talk on Monday at practice. Let's talk on Tuesday after practice. So be prepared to have a respectful conversation with this parent that has a genuine concern about their player. With older players, I'll also set an expectation that the player is the one that comes to me. Coach, I want to talk to you about my playing time. You are absolutely welcome to talk to me about your playing time. However, as a coach, I feel like I have let you down if you do not understand why you're having less playing time, because then I'm not communicating clearly. A lot of these things are issues that players just won't communicate about, so I set that expectation with them. And with a younger recreational team, of course, you may be subject to scheduling where they may have other siblings that are playing and they just can't make your practices or they just can't make your games on time, so they tend to be on the sideline a lot. Well, that's information that you need to know ahead of time so that you can be prepared with that player, and you may be flexible on playing time, you may not be flexible on playing time, but that's something that you have to know and you have to be defensible of. Today's podcast was really exciting to record because I spent so much time within the game environment. That's what we practice for each week. That's what we're striving towards. Think about setting up for success, that you are aiming for something towards the end of the season or whether it's a tournament, but it's always involved with the game. We're not building up to have a better practice in the following week. So listen in again, enjoy some of the material and some of the experience that I provide in here. A lot of this comes from talking to other coaches or observing other coaches and then finding out what really works for me, because all too often you get given advice or you see something and it just doesn't work for you. So use the advice, use the structure, and then just begin to change it for how it works for you and then also for your players too. You're going to create that environment where you are going to be successful, and success doesn't necessarily mean the win or the loss, but it's all part of your experience on the field with your players. Another huge thank you to Tactical Pad. Definitely head over to leadunsoccer.com and take a look over the material that Tactical Pad provides by clicking on the link to get over to their website. The animations and the gifts that you send to your players is so valuable for them to see, and it's also helpful for you to see and show them during the game on the field. Check out Lead on Soccer on YouTube and you'll see some of the animations in action combined with the player actions from the practice too. So again, more material coming very soon from Heads and Volleys, but for now, thank you so much and enjoy the game.